"He's coming, right, miss?" the waiter asked softly, looking at the table set for two. The woman in the wheelchair nodded gently. "He said he'd be here at 7. The clock showed 8:30. The restaurant door opened, but it wasn't the person she was waiting for. A modest-looking man walked in with his 6-year-old daughter, requesting the table beside hers. The little girl looked at the woman, then tugged her father's hand. "Daddy, she looks sad." The father smiled, stood up, and pulled out the chair across from her. "I'm sorry, but if someone dares to leave you waiting alone like this, maybe he doesn't deserve this seat." The entire restaurant fell silent. Ethan Cole was 35 years old, a single father, a mechanical design engineer. Raising his 6-year-old daughter Lily alone after his wife died in an accident 3 years ago. He was simple in his ways, living modestly, constantly teaching his daughter how to observe the world and help others. "You can't change the whole world, sweetheart," he would tell her, "but you can make one small corner of it better." This Christmas Eve, he was taking his daughter to a small restaurant, a Christmas gift he had promised her. Nothing fancy, just a quiet dinner together, the two of them against the world like always. While waiting for their table, Lily tugged on his sleeve, pointing toward a table near the window. A woman sat in a wheelchair, wearing a deep blue dress, her eyes distant as she gazed out at the snowy street. The table in front of her was set for two, with an empty chair across from her that seemed to grow more conspicuous with each passing minute. The waiter whispered to Ethan as he passed, "She's been stowed up. Reserved a table for two, but her date never showed. Been here for over an hour." Ethan looked down at his daughter and saw that Lily had already picked up the small flower from their waiting area and was walking toward the woman. "Lily," he called softly, trying to stop her. But his daughter had already reached the woman's table. She placed the flower down gently. "Miss, this is for you. Mommy used to say that anyone who's sad needs a flower." The woman looked down at the little girl, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you, sweetheart." Ethan quickly approached to apologize for the interruption, but the woman shook her head. "It's okay. Thank you for raising such a little angel." Lily stared at the empty chair across from the woman. "Daddy, why is she eating all alone?" Ethan looked at the woman, really looked at her. He saw the carefully applied makeup that couldn't quite hide the redness around her eyes. The elegant dress chosen with care for someone who never came. The way she sat with perfect posture despite being in a wheelchair, as if refusing to let her circumstances define her. He turned to the waiter. "We'll take this table." "You don't need to," the woman started to protest, but Ethan interrupted gently. "If someone dares to leave you waiting like this, he doesn't deserve this seat. But we do, if you'll have us." The entire restaurant went quiet. Even the pianist seemed to play more softly, as if the moment deserved its own soundtrack. The woman looked up at him, then at little Lily, who was already climbing into the chair across from her with the confidence of a child who doesn't yet understand social boundaries. A weak smile broke across the woman's face, the first genuine smile she'd had in months. I'd like that very much." Ethan sat down, trying to ignore the stares from other diners. Some looked confused, some touched, some uncomfortable. He focused only on this woman across from him and his daughter between them, already chattering away about her day at school. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending his hand, "and this hurricane of energy is Lily." The woman took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Clara Voss." Later that night, the waiter would tell his wife about what he witnessed. This man just sat down with a complete stranger who had been crying all night. Not because he wanted something, not because he had to, but because his little girl saw someone hurting, and he taught her that's reason enough to care. The waiter had seen a lot of dates in his years at the restaurant. First dates, last dates, anniversary dinners, breakup conversations. But he had never seen anything quite like this. A family being born at a table set for strangers. They sat together at the table, not saying much at first. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that happens when people are deciding whether to be real with each other. Lily filled the gaps naturally, the way children do. She talked about school, about her teacher who always smelled like cinnamon, about the talking snowman her class was building, about the songs her mommy used to sing. At the mention of mommy, Clara's eyes flickered to Ethan. He gave a small nod, acknowledging the unspoken question. My wife died 3 years ago, he said simply. Car accident. Lily was 3. I'm sorry, Clara said and meant it. Me too. Shh, he paused. But we're still here. Still eating dinner, still making memories. That's what she would have wanted. Clara felt something shift inside her chest. This man understood loss. Real loss, the kind that changes your DNA. My boyfriend, she started, then stopped. Corrected herself. My ex-boyfriend, I guess. He said he couldn't love someone who needed to be pushed places. Ethan's hand tightened around his water glass, knuckles going white. Then he never knew what it meant to stand still for someone. The words hung in the air between them. Clara looked at this stranger who had somehow said exactly what she needed to hear. Not pity, not empty encouragement, just truth. I'm 30 years old, she continued, words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. I used to be an architect, a good one. I won awards. I had plans. I was going to design buildings that changed skylines. She gestured to her wheelchair. Then 3 years ago, a car accident. I was driving. Another car ran a red light. My spine was crushed to 12. Paraplegia. Everything from the waist down just stopped working. Did the other driver survive? Ethan asked quietly. I don't know. I never wanted to know. I was too angry, too busy being angry at everyone. The other driver, the doctors, got myself. God. My boyfriend stayed for 2 years, then he started looking at me like I was broken. Like I was a responsibility he didn't sign up for. She laughed bitterly. Tonight was supposed to be our reconciliation dinner. He said he'd been thinking about things, said he wanted to try again. I got dressed up for the first time in months, did my hair, put on makeup, felt almost human again. And he didn't show, Ethan finished, didn't even call, just nothing. Lily, who had been listening with the intense focus children have when adults speak about important things, suddenly reached across the table and took Clara's hand. It's okay to be sad, Lily said with the wisdom of someone far older than 6. Daddy says sadness is just love with nowhere to go. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Your daddy is very smart. Dinner stretched longer than any of them expected. They ordered dessert, then coffee, then just sat talking as the restaurant slowly emptied around them. Clara learned that Ethan was a mechanical engineer at a mid-sized construction firm, that he coached Lily's soccer team even though he knew nothing about soccer, that he burned every meal he tried to cook except scrambled eggs, so they ate a lot of scrambled eggs, that he sang Lily to sleep every night with the same song his wife used to sing. Ethan learned that Clara had been one of the youngest people to ever win the European Architecture Innovation Award, that she designed buildings that were both beautiful and accessible, always thinking about how spaces made people feel, that she still sketched sometimes late at night when the loneliness got too loud, that she had a secret passion for terrible reality TV shows because they made her problems seem manageable. When the restaurant finally closed at 11, Ethan insisted on driving them home. The snow was falling heavily, coating the streets in white. On the drive, Clara sat quietly in the passenger seat, looking out at the winter landscape. Lily had fallen asleep in the back, her head tilted against the window. Thank you, Clara said softly. For tonight, I didn't feel broken. For the first time in a long time, I just felt like a person. Ethan kept his eyes on the snowy road. You were never broken. You were just waiting for someone brave enough to sit down. When they reached her apartment building, Ethan helped fold her wheelchair and carried it to her door. The building had a ramp. He noticed, filed it away as a small mercy in her difficult life. Clara paused at her door. Why did you do this? Really? You don't know me. You could have just ignored me like everyone else. Ethan thought about the question. Because sometimes strangers are second chances we didn't expect. Because my daughter saw someone hurting and I wanted to show her that's enough reason to care. Because, he paused. Because if I had been the one in that wheelchair and someone had walked past without stopping, I'd want to believe the world was better than that. Clara placed Lily's flower in a small vase by her window that night. The next morning, it was still fresh. She would keep that flower, pressing it between the pages of her favorite architecture book for years to come. A reminder of the night someone saw her as more than her wheelchair. 1 week later, Ethan returned to his office after the Christmas holiday break. His boss called an unexpected morning meeting. "Big news, everyone. We're up for final approval on the Aurora City housing project. This could be career-defining for all of us. The primary investor and design consultant is arriving today for the final presentation." Ethan had been working on Aurora City for 6 months. It was a residential complex specifically designed for accessibility. Ramps instead of steps, wider doorways, lower countertops. His wife Emma had started the concept years ago, dreaming of a place where people with disabilities wouldn't have to constantly adapt to a world not built for them. When Emma died, Ethan had tucked the sketches away, unable to look at them without his heart breaking. But 6 months ago, his company had won a contract for exactly this type of project. Ethan had quietly pulled out Emma's old designs and incorporated them, not telling anyone where the inspiration came from. The conference room filled with nervous energy. Investors, executives, engineers, all waiting for the design consultant who would make or break their careers. The door opened. Clara Voss wheeled herself into the room. Ethan felt the floor drop out from under him. Clara's eyes scanned the room, professional and composed, until they landed on him. Her expression shifted, surprise, recognition, something else he couldn't name. The presentations began, charts and numbers and projected timelines. Ethan barely heard any of it. His mind was racing. When it was his turn to present the engineering specifications, he stood on autopilot. He pulled up his designs, enhanced versions of the sketches his wife had created before her death. Clara leaned forward, studying the screen intently. Her expression changed from professional interest to something deeper. Recognition. After the presentations, after the handshakes and small talk, Clara asked to speak with Ethan privately. They went to an empty conference room. The door closed. Silence stretched between them. "Emma Cole," Clara said finally, "your wife, she sent me her portfolio 3 years ago." Ethan's breath caught. "What?" "I was starting a consultation firm. She reached out, wanted to work together on accessible design. Her ideas were brilliant, revolutionary. I was going to hire her. We had a meeting scheduled." Clara's hands gripped her wheelchair armrests. "The day of our meeting, I was driving to the office early. There was an accident. Someone ran a red light. My car and another car. The other driver died on impact." The world stopped. "That other driver was Emma," Ethan said. It wasn't a question. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I've spent 3 years trying to find her family, trying to find you, but I was too much of a coward." How do you tell someone that you're the reason their wife is dead? How do you apologize for existing? Ethan sat down heavily. The room spun. 3 years of grief suddenly had a face, a name, a person sitting across from him in a wheelchair, paralyzed by the same accident that killed his wife. "You were injured," he said slowly. "You lost the use of your legs. And she lost her life. I got the lesser sentence." Silence, heavy and suffocating. Ethan's mind flashed through the past 3 years. The funeral, Lily asking when Mommy would come home, the empty bed, the sketches he couldn't look at, the anger at a faceless driver who had destroyed his world. And now that driver had a face, was sitting across from him, had been abandoned by her boyfriend, had been left alone on Christmas Eve, had received kindness from him without knowing the truth. "I should go," Clara said, starting to turn her wheelchair. "Wait," she stopped. Ethan took a long breath. "I forgave the other driver a long time ago. I had to, for Lily. I couldn't raise her in a house full of hate, but I never knew who I was forgiving. I was forgiving a ghost, an abstract concept of a person." He looked at Clara, really looked at her. "And now I know, and I have to decide if I meant it. If forgiveness counts when you actually have to look at the person you're forgiving." Clara opened her bag with shaking hands. She pulled out a folder. "This is the Aurora City project, the accessible housing complex. Do you know why I took this job?" Ethan shook his head. "Because it was Emma's dream. I found her portfolio in my files after the accident. Read every word, every sketch. She wanted to build a place where imperfect people could live whole lives. That's what she wrote. Those exact words. Clara slid the folder across the table. Inside were Emma's original sketches, carefully preserved. I've been trying to make this happen for 3 years. Trying to bring her vision to life. Trying to do something that mattered. Trying to earn the right to still be here when she's not. Tears ran down her face. Let me help you finish this. Not as an apology. I know I can never apologize enough. But as a continuation. Let me help you build what she dreamed of. Ethan stared at the sketches. His wife's handwriting. Her vision. Her dream. He felt tears running down his own face, hot and unexpected. He nodded slowly. Not as an apology, as a partnership, as finishing what she started. Clara closed her eyes, relief washing over her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Ethan said. This is going to be hard. Working together, knowing what we know, but Emma would have wanted it. She would have wanted her work to matter more than her death. They sat in that conference room for another hour, neither quite ready to leave, both processing the impossible coincidence that had brought them to this moment. Two people connected by tragedy. Two people who had somehow become each other's second chances without knowing it. Outside the window, snow began to fall, soft and quiet, covering the city in white. The Aurora City project began in earnest. Claire and Ethan worked together almost every day. It was awkward at first, both of them carefully navigating around the truth that hung between them. Co-workers noticed the tension but misread it, gossiping about a potential office romance. If they only knew. Lily often came to the office after school, bringing her homework and her relentless optimism. She would spin around in desk chairs, draw on spare blueprint paper, and brighten the entire floor with her presence. The construction team slowly got used to seeing Clara in her wheelchair. At first, there were the usual things, people talking too loudly as if she were also deaf, asking Ethan questions meant for her, treating her like she was fragile. But Clara's sharp intelligence and sharper tongue quickly corrected those assumptions. Within weeks, she was the person everyone went to for solutions. The wheelchair became irrelevant. One particularly long evening, with most of the office gone home, Ethan and Clara sat reviewing final accessibility specifications, making sure every measurement, every angle, every detail served the people who would live there. Emma would have loved this, Ethan said suddenly. It was the first time either of them had said her name out loud to each other since the revelation. Clara looked up. Tell me about her. And he did. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan talked about his wife. Not as a saint, not as a tragedy, but as a real person. Her terrible singing voice, her habit of leaving cabinet doors open, her passion for making spaces that healed people, her belief that architecture was really about dignity. She sounds remarkable, Clara said when he finished. She was. She would have liked you, I think. You're both stubborn perfectionists who care too much about angles. Clara smiled. I would have liked to meet her, to work with her, before... I know. Silence. But it was a different kind of silence now. Not heavy with unspoken trauma, but soft with shared grief. Snow fell outside, heavy and thick. Ethan grabbed his coat. Let me drive you home. This weather's getting worse. As he helped Clara with her coat, he asked quietly, do you believe in second chances? She looked up at him, surprise in her eyes. I'm living in one, every day, every moment I get that she didn't. Then let's make sure this project honors that. Let's build something that makes the world a little bit better. 6 months later, they held the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Aurora City, a residential complex specifically designed for people with disabilities, chronic illnesses, and anyone who needed a space built for accessibility first. On the entrance wall, they mounted a bronze plaque for those who were left behind and those who came back. Below it, in smaller letters, designed by Emma Cole, completed by those who loved her dream. At the ceremony, Clara gave the speech. Ethan had offered, but she insisted. This building exists because a brilliant woman had a vision. Clara began, her voice carrying across the crowd. Emma Cole believed that spaces should serve people, not the other way around. She believed that everyone deserves to live with dignity, accessibility, and beauty. She paused, looking at Ethan and Lily in the front row. Some people come into our lives to replace what we've lost, but others come to help us stand up again, to remind us that tragedy doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the middle, the turning point, the moment everything changes. Ethan stood watching her, tears on his face, hand holding Lily's. His daughter whispered, "Daddy, is Miss Clara part of our family now?" "I think maybe she is, sweetheart." The weeks following the Aurora City opening were transformative for all of them. Clara started a consulting firm from her apartment in the complex, advising other developers on accessible design. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests, architecture firms wanting her expertise, disability advocacy groups asking her to speak. But she turned down most of them. She had spent too many years chasing recognition, chasing validation from a world that saw her wheelchair before it saw her talent. Now she just wanted to live. One Saturday morning, Ethan arrived early. Clara was still in her pajamas, hair messy, no makeup. She started to apologize, to explain she hadn't expected him so soon. "Don't," he said simply. "You don't have to perform for me." That sentence broke something open in her. For 3 years she had been performing, trying to prove she was still valuable, still worth loving, still deserving of space in a world built for bodies that work differently than hers. With Ethan, she didn't have to prove anything. They started spending more time together. Not dates exactly. Neither of them was ready to call it that. Just time. Lily playing into the courtyard while they talked, working on new design projects together, sharing meals, existing in each other's orbit. One evening, as they watched Lily play with other children in the Aurora City common area, Clara said quietly, "I used to think Emma was your ghost, something between us that would always make this impossible." "And now?" Ethan asked. "Now I think she's the bridge, the reason we understand each other, the reason we can both sit with pain without trying to fix it." Ethan nodded slowly. She would have liked that, being a bridge instead of a barrier. "Tell me something," Clara said. "That night at the restaurant, did you know? Did you sense something about me?" "No," Ethan admitted. "I just saw someone who needed kindness, but maybe—" He paused. "Maybe Emma was there somehow, pushing me toward you, arranging things." "You believe that?" "I believe in moments that feel like more than coincidence." Clara reached over, took his hand, not romantic, not yet, just connection. Two people who had survived the unsurvivable, holding on to each other in the aftermath. Lily ran over breathless and smiling. "Daddy, Miss Clara, come see what we built." They followed her to a structure the children had created from cardboard boxes and tape. A makeshift house, complete with a ramp leading to the entrance. "See," Lily said proudly, "everyone can get in, just like Aurora City." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. This child, who had lost her mother, who had every reason to be angry at the world, was building accessibility into her imaginary play, creating worlds where everyone belonged. "It's perfect," Clara whispered. That night, after Lily fell asleep on Clara's couch, Ethan carried his daughter to the car, but he paused at the door. "Clara?" "Yes?" "I'm glad you waited, that night at the restaurant. I'm glad you didn't leave before we got there," she smiled. "Me too, though I still don't know if it was patience or stubbornness." "With you?" "Probably both." As they drove away, Clara stood at her window, watching their taillights disappear. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel like she was watching life happen to other people. She felt like she was living it. 1 year later, Aurora City had become home to dozens of families. People with wheelchairs, people with chronic pain, elderly residents, single parents, families with children who had special needs. The community thrived. Clara lived there now. She had moved into one of the units, claiming she needed to quality control the living experience. But really, she had found a place where she belonged. Ethan and Lily visited every weekend. It had become their routine. Saturday mornings meant breakfast at Clara's place, where she had finally learned to make scrambled eggs almost as well as Ethan. That Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after they first met, Lily pulled Clara outside into the snow. "Miss Clara, today you're not eating alone." Clara laughed, looking at Ethan, who stood in the doorway grinning. "I guess I'm not." They set up a small table outside, under strings of lights that Lily had insisted on hanging. The snow fell gently, coating everything in quiet white. "Do you ever think about that night?" Clara asked Ethan as they ate. "The restaurant?" "Every day," he admitted. "I think about how close I came to just walking past, to teaching my daughter that ignoring pain is acceptable. And I think about how close I came to leaving before you arrived. I had my phone out, calling a cab. Another 5 minutes and I would have been gone." Lily, wise beyond her years, said, "Mommy used to say that timing is just love being patient." Both adults stared at her. "What?" she said, shrugging. "It's true." Ethan reached across the table, took Clara's hand. "No one deserves to be left at an empty table." "No," Clara agreed. "They don't." Inside Aurora City, behind windows glowing with warm light, dozens of families were celebrating their own version of home. Spaces designed with love, built on grief, transformed into purpose. In Clara's apartment, on the windowsill, sat a small glass frame. Inside was the flower Lily had given her that first night, carefully pressed and preserved. Below it, a note in Lily's childhood handwriting, "For the people who are shown, love makes flowers grow." The three of them sat in the falling snow, breath visible in the cold air, laughter mixing with the wind. A family, not by blood, not by traditional definition, but by choice, by trauma survived, by second chances accepted, by the simple act of sitting down when someone needed company. Sometimes the dinner we get stood up for is fate's way of rearranging the seating chart for the people who were always meant to sit beside each other. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to Strong Dad Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.